Greetings, everyone. Here we are with another overview, but this is a special overview. Since someone mentioned something about having the second edition Pathfinder Second Edition of Abomination Vaults Adventure, and wanting to see the difference between that and the fifth edition Pathfinder the fifth edition Pathfinder Abomination Vaults Adventure Path. Personally, I don't really care for the fact that Paizo chose to stick the word Pathfinder on the 5th edition book, because that might confuse some people who don't know their TTRPGs. And their kid asks, hey, I want to get Abomination Vaults. Well, it's for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And they get confused because they see the word Pathfinder, and they might, the 2024 DMG, he got upset and threw itself off the pile. Oh my goodness. It's not all about you, Mr. D&D. But anyways, let's straighten up the card pile here. So that might just confuse a few people, and trust me, I know, because I was young once. It's hard to believe. And that is not a very good choice. Should be some kind of either generic term, like Fantasy 5th edition or something like that. So there you go. It's important to note that this the fantasy 5th edition version of Pathfinder Abomination Vaults Adventure Path is $69.99, whereas the Pathfinder Second Edition version is only $54.99 in price. So Pathfinder Second Edition MSRP, the 5th edition MSRP. Largely is the same thing on the back, except for the 5th edition one has also the Abomination Vaults title card set up here on top. There's more changes than that. The 5th edition one is slightly thicker. I think it's like 380 some pages. Yeah, 384 pages. Where the Pathfinder one I think is like 254 pages. Yeah, that's correct. And then there's a few more fun details between that. So what I'm going to start with here is this Pathfinder Second Edition. And I'm going to do this one fairly quickly. The Pathfinder Second Edition one is pretty much straight through. Same kind of table of contents. The table of contents is not going to be substantially different. Please note that the inner cover is slightly different tone. They're both greens. And the 5th edition one right here, title page is a slightly different tone, I do believe. Nope, it's the same thing, basically, except for it has different page numbers and at different locations. As you can notice, there's this little bit of different organization here in the Adventure Toolbox than the Adventure Toolbox for the 5th edition one. So there you go. Otherwise, it's the same setup through the rest of the book. There's only a few pages difference between the two. The Adventure Toolbox for the Pathfinder Second Edition version starts at 212, or it's the same thing with the for the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition one, which also starts at 212. So the difference comes up in the monster stat blocks. The important thing to note for people is that the reason for this, really easy enough, is that in the case of Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition version, they do not use keywords nearly as much as Pathfinder does. So whenever you had to do, say, stat blocks for creatures, they had to end up being longer than the Pathfinder Second Edition one, because you can't just use engulf or grapple as a simple keyword or to give you the entire range of mechanics. You have to actually spell it out in the stat block. So as the Pathfinder Second Edition is the standard, we go into that. We come to the campaign overview page, which basically has a nice little map of a side view map of the Gauntlight lighthouse, going all the way down to the lowest level, which is the temple. and it walks you through game mastery advice for the adventure and so forth, and it gets you into Otari. Please note that Otari is the location that is a part of the brain fart for 5 seconds here, is a part of the beginner box, and I actually preparing this as an adventure for a group of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition players that they want to try out Pathfinder Second Edition. So there we go. So what we're going to end up having to do is there's an addendum that adds in this road that goes out here to the Gauntlight Keep, because it just happens to be over there. We walk ourselves through this. It gives us the basic little bits and pieces of the main town of Otari and the important NPCs that you will run into in that town. And then we get into the first chapter, which gets us to the dungeon. And we have pretty much the same standard setup. Each one of these chapters is actually one of the books from the adventure. The difference between this book and the individual issues of the adventure path for Abomination Vault is that this version has a lot of updates and fixes for common issues that people ran into when they were playing through the adventure path before it was concocted together and put into a bundle. I really like this overall as a update or an errata version, where you have just the set of issues that come out, and then Paizo basically decides, hey, we're just going to bundle them together, correct the issues, add in extra stuff that fixes some difficulty curve issues here and there in the adventure path, and boom. But basically, each one of these is a different chapter and a different level in the Gauntlight green. I want to say greenhouse, but it's lighthouse. So we have all these nice little adventures. The big differences are going to be, I'm going to have to jump all the way to the back. As usual for Paizo, they have a lot of really nice artwork in the adventures. Overall, it's actually quite well designed overall. However, there are those occasional annoying issues with some of their other books where they make it too in-world, and then you have to create your own index to find all the things you need because the indexes are substandard. But when we get to the Adventurer's Toolbox, this is the major difference between the 5th edition version and the Pathfinder 2nd edition version, as the Adventurer's Toolbox is substantially... Oh, please note that there's a 5th edition E up here versus just the skull. So whenever you look at the 5th edition book, you actually know always that you are indeed in the 5th... Oh, I actually went past... The Adventurer's Toolbox is actually a much larger section in the D&D 5th edition version. So we end up with the trouble of easily flipping past it. This is one of the first points in which we actually have a good deal of difference between the two different versions. First and foremost, we have different artwork for the Adventurer's Toolbox section, with two different characters and different foes in them. So this is the Pathfinder 2nd Edition version artwork, and this is the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition version artwork for the Adventurer's Toolbox. The Adventurer's Toolbox starts with Gauntlight as a artifact, and then it goes into various artifacts or magical items that are unique to the adventure for the 5th edition one. And then it goes through the creatures and important creatures and items or curses. This is specifically a curse. I had a brain for 5 seconds. I saw people, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's actually curses, not people. But various items, curses, and so forth. You got monsters and NPCs, which you actually have the artwork from the Pathfinder one right there. For the most part, it's the same thing in the Pathfinder 2nd Edition version, with the exception of you don't have You have a few extra items added in for the Pathfinder one. They're more specific to it. And you also have a bunch of there's not a whole lot of different items, but they're mostly items that are only specifically compatible with Pathfinder Second Edition. You also have archetypes, such as the Eldritch Researcher and the Drow Shootist, Ghost Hunter, Bright Walker, Corpse Light, and then you have all the creatures. So we actually, somewhere right here, yeah, right here, that's where the monsters start. I don't care for the fact that there is literally no dividing page between those two. I had a brain fart. But as you can see for the Pathfinder Second Edition one, you have a lot of the keywords in the stat blocks, where if I go to actual monsters for the adventure for the 5th edition one, you notice that there's not very many keywords that are utilized in the 5th edition one, so the stat blocks end up being a lot longer for each creature. So back up here. This is the exact replication. This is the Bright Walker right here. Whole stat block is bottom of this page, all the way through this page, and into the top of this section right here. So it's essentially almost 2 pages, where the Bright Walker in the Pathfinder Second Edition version is literally only this section of the page, and that's it. So instead of being almost in over a page's worth on the 5th edition one, you got slightly less than a page and extra details thrown in. It actually is a page and a page for the most part. So we have the Pathfinder Second Edition version creatures. We have the open game license, so this book is actually still in the OGL, and the glossary in the back for the Pathfinder Second Edition one. Or this one right here, all the creatures that were kind of in the forward section kind of got shoved back into here. And we have a situation where we have less artwork in some creatures, no artwork for some creatures, and then some artwork from others. So, as you can see, the stat blocks kind of bloat over into other things. It's hard to say exactly. It feels like the stat blocks are a little bit longer in the D&D 5th edition version. But at the same time, they're not super longer. They're only a few sentences more. It feels as if more of the stat blocks from the actual adventures got pulled back into here and condensed in the 5th edition version, where they were not done so in the Pathfinder Second Edition version. And that's probably the biggest difference between the two. And that the fact that the 5th edition version is slightly longer stat blocks. So the difference you can kind of notice if you really look at some of the creatures is that the conversion between them results in another 10 find that common creature again. Say the Bright Walker. The Bright Walker has an armor class of 14, where in the 5th edition version, where it has a armor class of 26 in the Pathfinder Second Edition version. 90 HP in the 5th edition. If you want to, I'll just hold this up, and you can go ahead and read that out. And then it continues on to this page. Or the Pathfinder Second Edition version. So there you go. overall, the 5th edition version seems to be pretty much in line with the Pathfinder Second Edition version. I'm not a super expert on converting between the two editions, so I might actually make a point of actually running this for a 5th edition group at some point. So it says it's from a heroes from 1st to 11th level for the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition campaign. So 1st to 11th, this has been set up and scaled for. Where the Pathfinder 2nd edition one is 1st to 11th. So, if you, it's kind of hard to rate. I do not rate or put a score on adventures because I haven't ran these yet. But from my overall seeing is that the way it's written, it's fairly easy. Paizo seems to do a lot better job of writing adventures than, say, Wizards of the Coast does, as the adventures are not overly... Wizards of the Coast can be best described as it's bloated writing with fluff details, yet at the same time, it also is adventure-wise thin. No official Wizards of the Coast adventures. So, if you were to actually take a track of all the things that people do in Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition adventures, it's literally just point to point to point to point. There's hardly any side branches or extra stuff built around each little node in the adventure. And that's generally a problem that occurs in, say, an adventure where it takes a course over multiple levels. Where Paizo seems to have hit the balance a little bit better, where they give you enough details of covering the lore at the very beginning, but not so chonky as Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition does it in a lot of their Wizards of the Coast does it. And yet they are also, at the same time, they move from point to point more efficiently in their in their adventures, while at the same time having more details built around each little section or node of the adventure. So I would have to draw up a board that describes the exact level of layering and number of nodes that they do in the adventures. So it's kind of really hard to put into words. There's a little bit more a little more substance to each little interaction or adventure with the Pathfinder stuff, as the Paizo stuff, versus the Dungeons and Dragons 5th Edition WotC stuff. However, they're still fairly linear, so that's the problem in that. That's the problem with having complete adventures in a book, as opposed to adventure modules, is that you try to create an adventure that goes from point A to point Z in a story. And the longer and the higher the level you want to go, the thinner you have to make it, because you can't have too many deviations off that path. Otherwise, players and characters wander off course. Now, in my case, when I'm running not homebrew or homemade adventures, but pre-made adventures, I will oftentimes just homebrew entire sections onto the adventure. So the players get the urge to occasionally wander off the path. They wander into another little mini adventure in itself. And in some cases, if the players are getting really curious, I've actually done this before, I make the adventure the side adventure as creepy or terrifying as possible. There was this one little event in, say, my Mines of Phandelver adventure, when the characters went to the Old Owl Well, and they dealt with the necromancer there, and they wanted to check the well that's next to the excavation site. Now, I immediately went into Legend of Zelda mode and drew up all the imagery of entering the Shadow Temple at the bottom of the well. and described it as creepy as possible, which then resulted in my players deciding, nope, we're getting the fudge out of here, and they leave that place. I drew the first 5 or 6 chambers of the dungeon, improvising ahead of them, just in case my description didn't scare the crap of them out of the dungeon. But it succeeded. So they escaped, and as they traveled out, they took a turn and went off towards the orc encampment to take care of the orcs at Wyvern Torn. And they took care of the orcs there. They had some battles with some ogres and a few other fun things. And they leave, and they come back to the Y branch that connects to Old Owl Well. And I described that there's 1,000 little prickly pin points, like little tiny feet, like sharp as heck, punctured in, not actual feet, but little imprints into the ground, going from Old Owl Well all the way into the forest. And then there's this weird layer of cobwebs everywhere in the forest. And my players were like, nope, 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 nope. Get out of here. And they left and went all the way back to Phandalin. So that is one of my ways of like getting my players to not like go into a thing before I got it ready. Is just make it creepier, creepier, and creepier and more dangerous, and draw from all the creepy ass imagery I've ever seen, like in Legend of Zelda or in horror movies like The Thing or something like that, to get my players to like nope out of that situation as fast as possible. So, and then there's other times I'm not forcing the players to nope out. If they decide like, heck yeah, we're going into that creepy ass well and we're going to go through that well and fight whatever horrifying monsters on it, I'm going to have to be forced to quickly put together the next few rooms and make really quick some combats and creepy puzzles on the fly, or pull out a book or something for a trap or something. But anyways, the thing is that if you have nothing prepared for a direction that someone's going to make, you have the option of either improvising really quickly ahead and creating a bunch of stuff. That's the first option. The second option is telling people that I don't have anything prepared for that at this moment. I'm sorry, which might be a letdown for the players, and they kind of just wander back on the path. Or the third option I did is make it so scary, creepy, be terrifying, like a sleeping Tarrasque or something, or some kind of horrifying eldritch abomination, that the players just literally like say nope and get out of that dodge. Okay, so there you go. Overall, I do feel that they're pretty good adventures. It's a pretty good adventure overall. It is highly sought. It's a highly prized ovation. It has a fairly high ovation amongst people who have ran it. At some point, I'm going to have to run it myself. I might even run it for the same group in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, just outright. And then at some point, throw in, when we go into actually trying Pathfinder 2nd edition, working this into the actual adventure for Pathfinder 2nd edition. So, which then is an interesting case of me maybe getting the same group to go through the same thing twice, and I then can ask them questions about, okay, we've gone through this adventure in both Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition. What do you think of it? And I do happen to have, like, my main group that I'm currently with is basically 90% game masters. They play on Saturday. And then my Tuesday group is like half game masters. And my Monday group is almost entirely nothing but new people. There are 2 game masters and a new game master in that group, as well as a whole bunch of people who are literally brand new to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So, if I ever do actually get to running through these as adventures, I will redo this. I'll make another video that actually has a review on it, the magical word review, and actually give a firm score on it. Overall, what score I would give these, is probably like a 3-ish range score. Just because I'm not going to really want to give a firm score to adventures, because adventures can be highly variable depending on the group and the game master. So this is like in the 3 to 4 star range. Overall for Paizo, they are very good at writing their stuff out. It's not overly complicated. So the only problem with Pathfinder Second Edition is I'm really bad at math, and I'm not joking. I'm really bad at math. So I have to do all the combats, and I have to make a matrix for all the attacks from all the monsters, just so I can do the math very quickly, so the players are not sitting here watching me count up each of their attacks. So there you go. So thank you very much. What I mean by 3-ish, it's the 3 spectrum. It's not, from what I can read, is not bad. It's not the 2-star 2 spectrum, and it's not completely useless in the 1-star spectrum, but it's not exceptional, which is the 4-star spectrum. So there you go. Nice artwork. The 5th edition one is a little bit chunkier and more expensive. And there you go. Thank you very much for watching.